Chapter 1: The Last Loss. The sound was wrong. It wasn't the clean thwack of puck hitting leather or the sharp ping of iron. It was a sickening sequence: the clack of the puck hitting the post, the twang as it caromed off the cage of her helmet, and the soft, final rip of the net behind her. Ava Carter didn't move. She stayed coiled in her goalie crouch glove hand, still outstretched toward where the shot should have gone, a high blocker side snipe she'd read in the forward's eyes. Instead, the kid had lost the handle on a simple wrist shot and shoveled it weakly between her legs as she dropped. 5-hole, on the biggest stage. The red light behind her painted the ice a hellish glow. The buzzer was a scream of death. The roar of the opposing crowd was a wave that crashed over the glass and washed her team away. 2-1, final, national championship, lost. Carts, hey! Her captain, Jess, was suddenly in her sightline, tapping her blocker with a gloved hand. Jess's face was streaked with sweat and frustration, but her eyes were soft. Hell of a season, that's not on you. Ava managed a nod, her throat sealed shut. It was on her. The game had been a defensive masterpiece for 59 minutes and 40 seconds. One broken play, one misread, one moment where her discipline had flickered, replaced by desperate anticipation. She'd gone down a half-second too early, sealing her fate. She pushed herself up, the weight of her pads suddenly unbearable. She skated slowly to the bench, head down, avoiding the eyes of her teammates filing off. The silence on their side was louder than any crowd. The locker room was a tomb. The usual post-game chaos was absent, replaced by the quiet sniffling of freshmen and the hollow clatter of gear being dumped into bags. Coach Porter gave a short, gruff speech about pride and foundation, his words bouncing off the tile walls without landing. Ava sat on the wooden bench in front of her stall, methodically unbuckling. Chest protector, arm guards, leg pads. Each piece felt like a piece of armor she had failed to wield properly. Her hands were steady. Inside, she was a fault line. Her phone, buried in her bag, lit up with texts. "Mom, we are so incredibly proud of you. You were amazing. Love you." Her younger brother, Bummer. "You'll get it next year. Next year." The words didn't inspire. They loomed. Another year of 4:30 a.m. alarms, of frozen ponds at dawn, of being the singular focus, the last line of defense. Another year of the subtle sidelong glances from scouts, the whispered for a girl that followed every compliment. She was a star, but a qualified one. Her margin for error was 0. Under the scalding shower spray, she let the water hammer her neck and shoulders. The heat didn't reach the cold knot in her chest. The image played on a loop, the puck tumbling end over end, sliding through the tiny gap she'd created. A clean, sharp thought cut through the steam. Never again. She would not feel this hollow, gnawing failure. She would not be the reason. She would become more than a goalie. She would become an inevitability. A wall of focus so absolute that doubt couldn't find a crack. Failure was a luxury, and she was done being extravagant. Chapter 2: The New Coach. The athletic complex in early September hummed with a specific kind of energy. Polished floors, the tang of new rubber flooring, and the quiet, simmering ambition of athletes who believed this was their year. Ava walked in, her summer of solitary training, sprints on the beach, reaction drills in her garage, yoga for recovery, having honed her body into a harder, sharper instrument. The ghost of that 5-hole goal was a phantom limb, a constant reminder. The team gathered in the film room, a space that smelled of stale popcorn and ambition. Head coach Dan Porter, a man whose neck was as wide as his head, stood before the pull-down screen, arms crossed. "Ladies," his voice boomed, silencing the chatter. "New season, new rules." The target on our back is bigger because we were good enough to get within a heartbeat of a national title last year. Let me be clear. Almost is a swear word in this room now. He paused, his gaze sweeping over them. Then he gestured to the side of the room near the door. To make sure almost never happens again, we've added some artillery. Some of you with longer memories will know this face. We're damn lucky to have him. Ethan Cole is joining the staff as assistant coach, specializing in goaltending. A collective subtle inhale. A few whispered, "No way." Ava's breath caught in her chest. Ethan Cole, the Wall of Winnipeg. A name from highlight reels and sports magazine profiles. Not just a great goalie, a transcendent one. A Vezina Trophy finalist at 25. His career hadn't faded. It had been violently severed. A highlight reel collision at the blue line, a knee shredded beyond modern medicine's repair, a legacy cut off at its absolute peak. After a year of silent rehab, he'd vanished from the public eye. He stood leaning against the wall, arms loosely crossed. He was taller than he'd looked on TV, his frame still powerfully built but leaner, stripped of the bulk needed to battle in the crease night after night. He wore a simple, dark blue team polo and black athletic pants. His face was all disciplined angles, a sharp jaw, a straight nose, eyes the color of a winter lake under a gray sky. His hair was cropped short, no nonsense. He offered no welcoming smile, just a single, slight nod of acknowledgement. But it was his eyes that held her. As they scanned the room, they didn't glance, they assessed. Lingered on the 3 other goalies, then on her, for a half-second longer. There was no flicker of recognition, no the one who lost the big one. Just cold, analytical focus. A master craftsman looking at a set of tools. Coach Cole's word on all things between the pipes is final, Porter continued. He sees things the rest of us don't. Your job isn't to question, it's to listen. Ethan pushed off the wall. His voice, when he spoke, was lower than she expected, calm and utterly devoid of the rah-rah energy that infected most coaches. Goaltending isn't about stopping pucks, he began, and the room fell so silent Ava could hear the hum of the projector. It's about controlling space, controlling chaos. Most of all, it's about controlling fear. Your job isn't to react to the shooter. It's to make the net look so damn small before he even decides to shoot that he feels hopeless. He paused, letting the concept settle like a stone in water. We start tomorrow, 5 a.m., be ready to work. He didn't ask if there were questions. He stated facts. Then he turned, opened the door, and was gone, the soft click of the latch sounding final. The room erupted in a low buzz of speculation and resumed conversations. Ava remained in her seat, her hands flat on her thighs. A legend. A ghost from the hockey world's recent past. Her new coach. Her initial feeling was a deep, intimidating awe, the kind you feel standing at the edge of a cliff. The feeling that followed, quick and cold, was fear. He would see everything. Every tiny flinch, every moment of hesitation, every ghost of past failures, including the one that sat in her gut like a stone. And beneath that, something else, a thread of connection she immediately tried to sever. In the flat, guarded stillness of his eyes, in the careful way he held himself, she saw it. He wasn't just teaching control. He was living it. He was guarding something, too. Chapter 3, First Training. The arena at 5 a.m. was a cathedral of quiet cold. The ice surface, freshly zambonied, was a sheet of pure, untouched white under the dim glow of emergency lights. The only sounds were the distant hum of compressors and the soft shush of Ava's skates as she took slow, deliberate laps, stretching out the last of her sleep. She was always first. It was a non-negotiable. The ice was hers in these silent moments. The heavy metal door to the bench clanged open, a jarring sound in the stillness. Ethan walked in, a heavy mesh bag of pucks slung over one shoulder, a tablet tucked under his arm. He didn't call out a greeting. He stepped onto the ice in sleek black sneakers, moving with a cautious, economic grace that spoke of a body intimately familiar with its own limitations. "Carter," he said, his voice carrying easily in the empty space. She glided to a stop in the crease. "Coach, you play deep in your crease, almost on your goal line." It wasn't a question or a criticism, just a clinical observation that felt like an X-ray. "I like to see the play develop," she said, her own voice echoing slightly. "You like to react," he corrected, dropping the bag of pucks at the top of the face-off circle with a dull thud. "That's why you went down on the championship goal. You were waiting, reading, then reacting. We're not here to react, we're here to dictate." He fished a puck from the bag. "Start at the top of the blue paint. I'm going to move. You're going to move with me, stay on your feet, match my angle, not after me, with me." For the next 50 minutes, it was a silent, grueling dance. He'd stick handle with a deceptive, almost lazy ease, his eyes not on the puck but on her posture, the angle of her skates, the set of her shoulders. He'd fire a shot, not with blistering NHL speed, but with perfect, infuriating placement. Glove side high, blocker side low, 5-hole, precisely between her pads when she flinched. "You're dropping your left shoulder when you think I'm going glove side. It's a tell. They'll see it from the press box. Your stick is too active. You're fishing, be patient. Let the play come to you." Again. Her thigh muscles screamed from holding the deep crouch. Sweat trickled down her temples, stinging her eyes inside the mask. Her breath came in ragged plumes. He didn't offer praise. He offered correction. His voice was a low, constant stream of technical adjustments, stripping her game down to its components. Finally, he held up a hand. "Enough." She straightened, a groan escaping her lips as she leaned heavily against the crossbar, sucking in deep, burning lungfuls of cold air. He skated toward her, stopping just outside the blue paint of her crease. The distance felt charged. For the first time, she saw something in his eyes beyond the dispassionate coach, a flicker of the fierce, calculating competitor he must have been. "The goal last year," he said, his voice dropping so low it was almost swallowed by the vastness of the empty arena. "You've spent the whole summer practicing to make sure it never happens again." She went perfectly still. How could he possibly know that? "I can see it," he said, as if hearing her thought. "You're so focused on not opening the 5-hole, you've locked your hips. You've traded one vulnerability for another. The puck finds stiffness, Carter. It always does." He held her gaze, and the intensity was like a physical touch. "We're not here to build a fortress with one obvious weak point. We're here to become water. You understand?" She nodded, breathless, not from exertion, but from the unnerving precision of his vision. He saw her. Not just the goalie, but the fear, the overcorrection, the desperate need for invincibility. He saw the ghost, and he was naming it. "Good," he said, and just like that, the moment shattered. The shutters came down behind his eyes, and he was the coach again. "Showers. We do this again Thursday." He turned and glided off the ice, his sneakers whispering on the ice, leaving her alone in the crease. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The chemistry between them wasn't romantic. Not yet. It was something more primal, the spark of one obsessively disciplined mind recognizing another. The terrifying, exhilarating realization that this man could dismantle her, piece by mental piece, and rebuild her into something she barely dared imagine. And the more terrifying thought, echoing in the silent arena, she wanted him to. Chapter 4. warning signs. The Thursday session was worse, or better. Ava couldn't decide. Ethan didn't just see her tells, he exposed them mercilessly. He had her face a shooter from the point while he stood behind the net, calling out her flaws in that flat, uninflected tone. Your stick is off the ice by an inch when you track left. You're tilting forward on your skates. You look eager, look bored. Your glove hand is too high. It's a neon sign saying shot here. It was invasive. It was like having her brain scanned. By the end, she felt physically raw and mentally flayed. As she gulped water at the bench, he approached, wiping his own brow with the sleeve of his sweatshirt. The casual intimacy of the gesture, the glimpse of a weary human beneath the coach, caught her off guard. You're a fast study, he said, not looking at her, watching the Zamboni make its lazy rounds. But you're studying the wrong textbook. You're memorizing mistakes instead of learning the game. What's the difference? The question came out more defensive than she intended. Now he looked at her. Memorizing mistakes means you're playing afraid. Learning the game means you're playing ahead of it. He paused. You have the reflexes. You have the discipline. You don't have the calm. Yet. Yet the word was a lifeline. It implied a future he saw himself in. That was the first warning sign. The second came a week later during a brutal conditioning skate. The forwards were doing suicides, gasping for air. Ava and the other goalies were off to the side, working on lateral pushes with resistance bands. Hers snapped with a loud crack, the rubber stinging her calf. She stumbled, biting back a curse. Ethan was across the ice in an instant, not running, but moving with swift, deliberate purpose. You okay? Fine, just a snap. Let me see. It's fine, coach. Carter, let me see the leg. It wasn't a request. It was the voice he used to command the ice. Flushing, she pulled up the leg of her sweatpants. A thin, angry red welt was rising on her calf. His fingers, warm and surprisingly calloused, brushed the skin just beside it, checking for swelling. The contact lasted less than 2 seconds. It felt like an electric current shot straight up her spine. She jerked her leg back. He stood up, his expression unreadable. Put ice on it. Use the green bands next time, they're newer. He walked away, but not before she saw him flex the hand that had touched her, as if shaking off a sting. The third sign was the silence. Not the absence of sound, but the one that grew between them. Their 5 a.m. sessions became a series of intense, wordless exchanges. A nod from her meant she understood the drill. A raised chin from him meant do it again. They communicated in glances and gestures, a private language that excluded the rest of the world. Sometimes, after a particularly good sequence where she read his deke and stayed with him perfectly, he wouldn't say good. He'd just stop and look at her. A long, quiet look that felt heavier than any praise. She found herself watching him when he wasn't looking. The careful way he kneeled to demonstrate a butterfly slide, hiding a wince. The distant look in his eyes during team meetings, as if he were watching a different game on the back of his eyelids. The way he always kept a physical buffer, a stick's length, a bench's width between himself and everyone else, especially her. The warning wasn't a klaxon. It was a low, steady hum in her blood, a vibration that resonated every time he was near. It was the feeling of standing at the edge of that cliff again, but this time, part of her wanted to see what was at the bottom. She knew the rules. Coach Porter had spelled them out on day 1, his voice leaving no room for interpretation. Relationships between players and staff are strictly prohibited. It's a breach of trust, a conflict of interest, and a career ender for everyone involved. Don't be stupid. She wasn't being stupid. She was being pulled by a gravity she didn't understand, toward a man who was a master of control, yet whose every guarded glance felt like a crack in his own armor. The attraction wasn't about his faded fame or his sharp jawline. It was the recognition. In his controlled isolation, she saw a reflection of her own. And that was the most dangerous warning sign of all. Chapter 5: The Rule. The reminder came not from Porter, but from Ethan himself. It was after a full team video session, dissecting a sloppy exhibition game loss. The room was tense, players filtering out with sullen energy. Ava lingered, retying her sneaker, wanting a word with him about her footwork on a particular rebound. As the last player left, he powered down the projector and turned to her. "Carter, a minute." As she straightened up, "Coach." He didn't sit. He leaned against the edge of the table, arms crossed. The fluorescent light made the shadows under his eyes look deeper. "You're doing good work. The extra sessions are showing." A flicker of warmth in her chest. "Thank you." But the word landed like a gate slamming shut. "There are lines. You're a player. I'm a coach." That dynamic has to be clear, to everyone, especially to us. The warmth vanished, replaced by a cold splash of humiliation. Had she been that obvious? I know the rules, coach." Knowing them and living them are different things. His voice was low, devoid of its usual technical chill. This was personal. "This isn't a game on the ice. There are no second chances here. A crossed line doesn't mean a penalty. It means everything you've worked for, your scholarship, your draft prospects, your reputation goes away. And so does mine." He finally met her eyes. "Do you understand what I'm saying?" She felt naked, seen in a way she hadn't wanted to be. He wasn't just stating policy. He was acknowledging the current that had been building between them. Dee felt it too. And he was terrified of it. "I understand," she said, her voice tight. "Good." He pushed off the table. The distance between them felt like a canyon. The work stays on the ice. The focus stays on the game. Nothing else exists. He walked out, leaving her in the suddenly claustrophobic room. The rule wasn't just a warning. It was a confession. He felt the pull, and his response was to build a higher wall. As she left the complex, the autumn air sharp against her hot face, the reality settled in. This wasn't a crush. It was a slow, mutual recognizance across a forbidden border. And he had just raised the flag of surrender before either of them had even fired a shot. The game had just gotten infinitely more complicated. Chapter 6: Extra Practice. The rule lay between them like a sheet of unbreakable glass. Clear, cold, defining the space. They could see each other through it, but everything was distorted, untouchable. Their 5 a.m. sessions didn't stop. If anything, they became more intense, more silent. The tension that had been a low hum was now a high-voltage wire they were both careful not to trip. Every instruction was clinical. Every correction was precise. He never touched her, not even to adjust her posture. He used his stick to tap her skate, pointed with his glove to show an angle. The physical distance was rigidly maintained, which only made the awareness of his body, the shift of his shoulders, the flex of his hand around his stick, more acute. One Tuesday, a nor'easter blew in, a howling pre-dawn beast of wind and sleet. Practice was officially canceled. The campus was a ghost town. Ava lay in her dorm bed, listening to the storm rage, her body itching with unused energy. The silence of the missed routine felt like a void. Her phone lit up. A text from an unsaved number, but she knew. "Rink, side door. If you want. No name, no question, just a statement of fact." Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was crossing a line. An unofficial, off-the-books session during a storm. No one would know. They would know. She went. The side door to the arena was unlocked. The vast space was dark, lit only by the red exit signs and the eerie, reflected glow of security lights on the empty ice. It was colder than usual, the storm whistling in the rafters. He was already there, a lone figure in the center of the ice, skating slow, easy laps. No bag of pucks, no tablet, just him and the empty sheet. He didn't stop when she stepped out. He just completed his circle and glided to a halt a careful 10 feet away. "Couldn't sleep," he said, his voice echoing softly in the cavernous dark. "Neither," she replied. It was mostly true. "Skate." For 20 minutes, they just skated. Not drills, not coaching. Silent, parallel orbits around the face-off circles, up and down the length of the ice. The only sounds were the slice of their blades and the distant fury of the wind. It was intimate in a way their coached sessions never were. There was no performance, no evaluation. Just two people moving through the same dark, cold space, bound by a shared, unspoken obsession. He finally stopped by the player's bench. She drifted to a halt opposite him, across the boards. "You think too much," he said, his breath a pale cloud. "During games, I can see it, the calculus behind your eyes. If he does this, I do that. It's a half-second lag." "In the quiet, I can't help it," she admitted, the darkness making confession easier. "The quiet is where you win," he said. He leaned his forearms on the boards, looking down at the ice between them. "Not by thinking, by knowing, by making the net so small in your mind that any shot feels like a surrender." He looked up, his eyes catching the dim red light. "The greats aren't great because they make incredible saves. They're great because they make the other team believe incredible saves are the only option." She mirrored his posture, leaning on the boards. The wood was the only thing between them. "How do you do that, after a bad goal, after a loss?" He was quiet for a long time. The storm rattled a distant door. "You don't forget it," he said finally, his voice lower. "You absorb it. You let it teach you, and then you lock it away in a room you don't visit on game day. The past is a tool, not a home." She knew he wasn't just talking about hockey anymore. He was talking about his knee, his vanished career, the life he'd locked away. "Does it work?" she asked softly. His gaze held hers through the gloom. "Most days." The moment stretched, thin and fragile. The storm outside, the private darkness, the profound understanding, it all conspired to make the glass between them feel thinner. She saw his eyes drop to her mouth for the briefest instant before he pushed back from the boards, straightening up. "Enough," he said, the coach's voice returning, but softer at the edges. "Get some rest. Don't make a habit of this." He turned and skated toward the side door, his blades echoing, then fading. He didn't look back. Ava stayed on the ice long after he'd gone, the cold seeping through her sweatpants. The extra practice hadn't involved a single puck, but she felt like she'd just faced 100 shots, and every one of them had been aimed at the fragile wall she was trying to build around her heart. The rule was still there. But in the dark, with the storm as their witness, they had just acknowledged why the rule was necessary. And that made it feel more impossible than ever. Chapter 7. Cracks in the Armor. The storm session created a new, fragile layer beneath their professional interactions. A shared secret, acknowledgement. It made the silence between them heavier, more charged. A week later, the team traveled for an away game. A long bus ride through gray, flat countryside. Ava had the window seat near the back. Ethan sat up front with the other coaches, a clipboard on his knee, his profile turned to the passing fields. He was a statue of focus. The game was a brutal, grinding affair. The other team played a heavy, chippy style, crashing the net at every opportunity. Ava took 2 hard shots off the mask in the first period, the second one ringing her ears. She shook it off, made the next save. But the contact was relentless. In the second period, a hulking forward barreled through the crease on a follow-through, his skate catching the back of her calf as she went down. It wasn't intentional, just big, careless hockey. A searing line of fire shot up her leg. She finished the period, making 2 more key saves through gritted teeth. In the locker room at intermission, she peeled down the leg pad. A nasty, deep bruise was already blooming, purple and angry, just below her knee. The team trainer, Mike, poked at it. "You're fine." "Just a Charlie horse, walk it off." She tried to stand, putting weight on it, and winced. "Let me see." The voice came from the doorway. Ethan stood there, having slipped away from the coach's box. His expression was unreadable as he crossed the room. Mike moved aside without a word. Ethan knelt in front of her, his focus entirely on the injury. He didn't touch it at first. He just looked, his gaze clinical. "Can you flex the ankle?" She did. "Rotate the knee." She did. Another spike of pain. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "It's not a Charlie horse. It's a direct impact to the gastrocnemius. You're losing lateral push if you stay in." He looked up at her, his eyes meeting hers. In them, she saw no coach, no rule keeper. She saw pure, unadulterated concern, and beneath that, a flash of anger at the play, at the carelessness, at the situation. "You're coming out." "I can finish," she argued, her voice low. "No," he said, the word final. It wasn't a coach's order. It was something more primal, a protection. He stood up, turning to Mike. "Get the backup warmed up. Carter's done." He didn't wait for an argument. He walked out, leaving the locker room buzzing in his wake. Ava sat there, the throbbing in her leg secondary to the thunder in her chest. He had seen her pain, assessed it with a veteran's eye, and made a call that had nothing to do with winning the game and everything to do with her. He had shown a crack, not in his knowledge, but in his detachment. They lost the game. The bus ride back was long and quiet. Ava sat with her leg elevated on the seat, an ice pack melting against the bruise. She pretended to sleep. At a rest stop, everyone filed out for coffee and bathrooms. She stayed put, staring out at the dark parking lot. The bus door hissed open, and footsteps came down the aisle. She didn't turn. He sat in the empty seat across from her, not looking at her, offering a small brown paper bag. Ibuprofen and a proper cold pack. As she took it, "Thanks." He was silent for a moment, watching the few stragglers from the team smoking under a street lamp. That forward, number 22, he does that. It's his game. He wasn't trying to hurt you. He was just being a wrecking ball. "You know him." "I played against him, briefly." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, gone in an instant. He was a wrecking ball then, too. This was new, a sliver of personal history, a glimpse into the life before the knee, before the clipboard. She held her breath, afraid to shatter the moment. "He ended your season once," she ventured, remembering an old highlight reel, a massive collision, Cole down, not getting up. "Not him," Ethan said quietly, his gaze still fixed outside. "But someone like him. The point is you have to see them coming, not just the puck, the intention, the chaos they bring." He finally turned his head to look at her. The harsh bus light carved lines of fatigue into his face. You can't control the chaos, but you can decide not to let it live in your crease. Sometimes that means standing tall. Sometimes it means knowing when to come out and fight another day. It was the most he'd ever said to her off ice that wasn't pure instruction. It was advice, but it was also a confession. He was talking about knowing limits. His own, and now hers. You would have stayed in, she said. I was older, dumber, and I had something to prove to everyone, including myself. He looked down at his own hands resting on his knees. One of them, she noticed, absently massaged the spot where his infamous knee injury had been. Proving points is a luxury you can't afford, not with your career, not with your body. The bus door hissed open again, laughter spilling in as players returned. The moment shattered. Ethan stood up, the mask of the coach settling back over his features. Rest the leg. No morning skate tomorrow. He moved back to the front of the bus without a backward glance. Ava clutched the paper bag, the pills inside rattling softly. The bruise on her leg would heal. But the crack he'd shown her, the glimpse of the man beneath the legend, the protector beneath the coach, that was something else. It was a vulnerability he hadn't meant to reveal. And it made the rule feel less like a wall and more like a dam holding back a flood she was no longer sure she wanted to stop. Chapter 8, First Emotional Moment. The bruise faded from purple to a sickly yellow-green, but the memory of his protectiveness didn't. It lived in her gut, warm and dangerous. They returned to the relentless rhythm of the season. Wins, losses, dawn practices, late-night film. The glass between them remained, but she now knew there were fissures in it. She caught him watching her sometimes, not as a coach evaluating form, but as a man struggling with a puzzle. His gaze would linger a beat too long before he'd snap it away, his jaw tightening. The crack widened during a midweek home game against their fiercest conference rival. It was a goalie's nightmare, a defensive breakdown in front of her, pinging passes, screened shots, rebounds bouncing like lottery balls. She fought, scrambling, stacking pads, throwing her body into a blur of desperation. She let in 4 goals in 2 periods. None were soft, but in the goaltender's merciless calculus, they all counted the same. Failure. Coach Porter pulled her to start the third. It was the right call. The backup went in, and the team, jolted by the change, tightened up. They lost 4-2, but the damage was done. In the locker room afterward, the air was thick with a different kind of silence. Not the grief of a championship loss, but the grim acceptance of a battle badly fought. Teammates offered her weary nods. Tough bounces, carts. Defense hung you out. The platitudes were salt in the wound. She showered quickly, the hot water doing nothing to wash away the feeling of being porous, permeable. She dressed in a fog, mechanically pulling on jeans and a hoodie. Everyone else filtered out, eager to escape the scene of the crime. Finally, she was alone. The silence was absolute. She sat on the wooden bench in front of her stall, head in her hands, elbows on her knees. The emotion she'd locked down during the game, the frustration, the humiliation, the sheer, screaming anger at herself, swelled up, a tidal wave breaching the levee of her discipline. A sob tore from her throat, harsh and ugly in the empty room. Then another. She cried for the loss, for the public failure, for the weight of a dream that felt like it was crushing her. She didn't hear the door open. Ava. His voice, not Carter. Ava, soft, close. She jerked her head up, scrubbing violently at her face with her sleeves. He stood a few feet away, having entered the sacred player's only space. He changed out of his coaching suit into dark jeans and a plain gray sweater. He looked human, tired. Go away, she choked out, humiliation burning hotter than the tears. He didn't go away. He took 2 slow steps and then knelt on the concrete floor in front of her, putting them at eye level. He didn't touch her. He just waited, his presence a calm, solid anchor in her storm. They were good goals, she rasped, needing him to understand. Every one. I read them, I was there, I just wasn't enough. I was a half step slow. I saw it all and I couldn't stop it. I know, he said, his voice low. I watched. Then you know it was my fault. It was hockey, he corrected, his gaze steady on hers. It's a game of mistakes. The other team capitalizes. You don't get to carry every goal like a stone. You acknowledge it, you learn from it, and you put it down. Right here, right now. I don't know how, she whispered, the confession leaving her defenseless. For a long moment, he just looked at her, his gray eyes seeing every shattered piece. Then, slowly, as if moving through a dream, he reached out. Not to pull her into an embrace, but to take one of her hands where it lay clenched on her knee. He pried her fingers open gently, his own hand warm and sure around her cold, trembling one. It was the first real, deliberate, non-medical touch. You learn, he said, his thumb brushing over her knuckles, a tiny, shocking arc of comfort. By coming back tomorrow. By being the first one on the ice, by facing the next shot, that's the only how there is. His touch was undoing her completely. The tears came again, silent this time, streaming down her face. She didn't pull her hand away. She held on, her fingers tightening around his, clinging to the lifeline of his calm, his certainty, his broken understanding. He didn't let go. He knelt there, holding her hand in the silent, empty locker room while she fell apart. He was the coach, breaking every rule, crossing every line. And in that moment, he was the only thing holding her together. When her breathing finally evened, reduced to shaky hiccups, he gave her hand one last, firm squeeze and released it. He stood up, the distance returning. Go home, he said, his voice back to its normal timbre but softer. Sleep. The ice will still be there in the morning. He turned and walked out, leaving her with the ghost of his touch on her skin and the terrifying, exhilarating knowledge that the dam had not just cracked. It had broken. Chapter 9. Denial. The morning after the breakdown was a study in excruciating normalcy. Ava arrived at the rink at 4:55 a.m. as always. Her eyes were puffy behind her sunglasses, her body heavy with a sleepless night. The memory of his hand around hers played on a loop, a tactile ghost she couldn't shake. He was already on the ice, not skating, just standing at center ice, staring at the far net, a silhouette against the Zamboni's retreating glow. He didn't turn as she stepped out. She took her place in the crease, the routine of stretching feeling alien, like someone else's ritual. The silence was thicker than fog. After 5 full minutes, he finally moved. He skated not toward her, but to the bench, picking up a bucket of pucks. He dumped them at the top of the circle with a clatter that echoed in the cavernous quiet. Glove side high, he said, his voice stripped of all tone. It was the voice from day one, the mechanic. 10 reps. Focus on tracking the puck from my stick, not my eyes. He didn't look at her face, he looked at her glove. He fired the first puck. It whistled, snapping into her leather with a firm thwack. Your elbow is dropping, keep it up. Another puck, thwack. You're leaning, square your shoulders. Thwack, better. It was brutal, robotic. There was no mention of last night. No acknowledgement of tears, of a hand held, of a line vaporized. It was as if he'd used a software update to erase the memory from his own system and expected hers to be wiped clean too. She wanted to scream. To throw her glove at him and ask what the hell last night was if not this unbearable, careful distance. But she matched his energy. She became a machine. She absorbed his instructions, made the adjustments, stopped the pucks. Her saves were technically perfect and utterly soulless. After 30 minutes, he called it. Enough! Hit the bike for cardio. 30 minutes, zone 3. She didn't ask why the change in routine. She just nodded, skated off, and climbed onto the stationary bike in the corner. He stayed on the ice, taking lazy, endless laps, his head down. The denial wasn't a discussion. It was a mutually agreed upon act of violence against the truth. They were going to pretend the crack had never opened. They were going to bury the vulnerability under layers of drill sergeant coaching and robotic compliance. It worked for 2 days. They existed in a state of cold, professional armistice. But the tension didn't disappear. It metastasized. It lived in the way he'd suddenly turn and walk out of a room if she entered. In the way she'd catch him watching her from across the weight room, his expression unreadable, before he'd forcefully look away. In the electric charge that now filled the space between them during film sessions, making the air difficult to breathe. The team felt it. Jess nudged her after a particularly tense practice where Ethan had barked at everyone, his irritation seeming to radiate from a source no one could identify. "What's with Coach Cole?" "He's been a ghost with a grudge all week." "No idea," Ava lied, her voice flat. "Just coach stuff." The third day, during a small area passing drill, a puck took a bad hop and caught her right on the collarbone, just above her chest protector. It wasn't serious, but it stung like hell, a bright flash of pain. She gasped, dropping to one knee. Instantly, he was there. Not walking, but striding across the ice, his stick clattering to the surface as he dropped to a knee beside her. "Where?" "It's fine," she gritted out, eyes watering. "Where Carter?" His voice was sharp, urgent. His hands were already reaching, hovering over her shoulders, not touching but ready to. Collarbone, just a sting. His gaze scanned her face, checking for signs of worse injury, his concern naked and immediate. For a full 3 seconds, the denial shattered. In his eyes, she saw the same man from the locker room, the one who saw her pain and moved toward it, rules be damned. Then, as if realizing the entire team was watching, he rocked back on his heels, the shutters slamming down. He stood up, his voice returning to its impersonal boom. "Shake it off. Get to the bench if you need a minute." He skated away, picking up his stick, leaving her kneeling on the ice, the ghost of his near touch burning hotter than the puck's impact. The denial was a lie they were both telling. And like all lies, it was becoming harder to sustain than the truth. They were in the quiet before the quake. And the ground beneath their carefully constructed ice was beginning to tremble. Chapter 10, The Almost Kiss. The lie became unsustainable on a Friday night. A freak late-season ice storm had glazed the campus in a silent, dangerous sheen. Practice had been canceled. The dorms were loud with the restless energy of trapped athletes. Ava couldn't stand the noise. She pulled on her boots and a heavy coat, needing the biting quiet of the storm. She didn't plan to go to the rink. Her feet carried her there anyway. The side door was, again, unlocked. The arena was darker than before, the storm muting the usual security lights. The ice glowed with a faint, ethereal blue from the exit signs, and he was there, not skating. Sitting on the home team bench, still in his street clothes, elbows on his knees, head bowed. A bottle of water, untouched, sat beside him. He looked like a man praying or surrendering. She stood frozen just inside the door, the cold seeping through her. She should leave. This was the line, not just crossed but obliterated. He must have heard the door. He didn't startle. He just slowly lifted his head. His face was shadowed, but she could see the exhaustion carved into it, deeper than just physical fatigue. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice a low rasp that carried in the vast, frozen space. "Neither should you." A faint, grim twist of his lips. "Taché." She walked toward the bench, her boots loud on the rubber matting. She stopped a few feet away, not sitting. The space between them hummed with everything unsaid, the tears, the handhold, the denial, the constant, gnawing pull. "Why are you here?" she asked. He looked out at the empty ice. It's the only place that ever made sense to me, even now when it's the source of every problem I have. He paused. Why are you here, Ava? Her name on his lips in the dark was a shiver down her spine. Same reason, I guess. He finally looked at her, his gaze intense in the gloom. No, it's not. You have a future on this ice, a bright one. Mine is in the past. I'm just haunting the place. You're not a ghost, she said, her voice stronger than she felt. You're here, you're teaching me. I'm compromising you. The words were stark, brutal. Every second I spend with you outside of a scheduled practice is a compromise of your focus, of your future, of my, he trailed off, shaking his head. Of your what? She pressed, taking a step closer. He stood up abruptly, as if her proximity was a threat. He turned to face her, the bench the only thing between them now. My sanity, he breathed. My last shred of professional integrity. Take your pick. The air was so charged she could taste it, metallic and sharp. The storm howled outside, a fitting soundtrack to the tempest in the room. She saw the war in his eyes, the rigid discipline fighting a losing battle against a tidal wave of want. I think about it, she whispered, the confession ripped from her. All the time, the way you look at me when you think I won't notice. The way your voice changes when it's just us. I'm not compromising anything. I'm seeing it clearly for the first time. Ava, don't. It was a plea. Why? Because it's against the rules. We've been breaking them for weeks and pretending we haven't. He took a step around the bench, closing the distance. He was so close now she could see the flecks of darker gray in his irises, feel the heat radiating from him in the cold air. His control was a visible, trembling thing. It will ruin you, he said, his voice ragged. It will ruin everything you've worked for, everything I'm trying to help you build. What if it's worth it? The question hung between them, foolish and brave. He made a low, pained sound in his throat. His eyes dropped to her mouth. His hand came up slowly, as if moving through water. He didn't touch her. He stopped just short, his fingertips a breath away from her cheek. She could feel the heat of them. Time stopped. The world shrank to this pocket of dark, frozen air, the space between his hand and her skin, his eyes and her lips. The almost was a physical presence. The kiss was inevitable. It was in the lean of his body, the parting of her lips, the magnetic pull that had been there since the first 5 a.m. session. His breath fanned her face. Her heart was a wild drum against her ribs. She swayed forward, the last millimeter about to vanish. A deafening crack echoed through the arena, followed by the groan of straining metal. A tree limb, weighted with ice, had sheared off and slammed into the roof high above. They jolted apart as if electrocuted. Ethan stumbled back 2 steps, his chest heaving, his expression one of pure, unvarnished horror. Not at the near miss with the tree, but at the near miss with her. The spell was shattered, replaced by a chilling wave of reality. He looked at her, then at the roof, then back at her, the guilt and fear in his eyes so profound it was like a slap. This can't happen, he choked out. It can't. He didn't wait for a response. He turned and practically ran for the door, his footsteps echoing in a frantic retreat. The heavy door slammed shut behind him, leaving her alone in the blue gloom, the ghost of his almost touch burning on her skin, the taste of a kiss that never was lingering on her lips. The almost kiss hadn't crossed the line. It had shown them both how desperately they wanted to, and how catastrophic it would be if they did. The storm inside was now louder than the one outside. Chapter 11, Jealousy. The aftermath of the almost kiss was a deep freeze. Ethan became a ghost in the daylight. He showed up for practices, gave clipped instructions, left immediately. He stopped the 5 a.m. sessions entirely, citing a new periodization schedule. He never looked at her for more than a second. If their paths crossed off the ice, he gave a curt, impersonal nod and kept walking, his posture rigid as steel. The denial was back, but it was fiercer, armed with the knowledge of how close they'd come to ruin. It felt like punishment. Ava threw herself into hockey with a manic fury, her saves becoming almost violent in their precision. She was a fortress on the ice and a raw nerve off it. The catalyst came on a Tuesday afternoon. The team had a rare day off from the rink, but Ava went to the athletic complex anyway to lift. As she crossed the lobby toward the weight room, she saw him. He was near the main entrance, talking to a woman. She was tall, elegant in a way that spoke of money and ease, wrapped in a tailored wool coat. She laughed at something he said, touching his arm. He didn't pull away. He smiled, a real, relaxed smile Ava had never seen, and said something back, leaning in slightly. Ava felt it like a physical blow to the sternum. The air left her lungs. She stood frozen, half hidden by a trophy case, watching. The woman was beautiful, confident, appropriate. Everything Ava wasn't in this context. She watched Ethan's body language, open, unguarded in a way he never was around the team, around her. A strange, hot-cold feeling flooded her veins. It was sharp, acidic, and utterly unmistakable, jealousy. The woman left with a final wave. Ethan watched her go, his smile fading back into its usual neutral line. He turned, and his eyes immediately found Ava across the lobby. His relaxed posture vanished, shoulders squaring, the shutters slamming down over his expression. He gave her that same curt nod and strode off in the opposite direction. The encounter lasted less than a minute. It unraveled her completely. Later, in the deserted weight room, she attacked the leg press, loading on plates until the stack was intimidating. Jess wandered in, grabbing a nearby bench. "Whoa, Carter, trying to crush diamonds." "Just working," Ava grunted, pushing the weight. "Sure." Jess sat up, wiping her neck with a towel. "Hey, did you see Coach Cole with that woman earlier? In the lobby?" Ava's push stalled. She didn't trust her voice, just gave a short nod. "Dr. Lauren Vance," Jess said, a gossipy lilt in her tone. "Sports psychologist, works with a bunch of pro teams. Word is the athletic department hired her as a consultant. Guess they want us mentally ironclad for the playoffs." She shrugged. Made sense he was talking to her, given his, history. Ava lowered the weight slowly. A consultant, a professional, not a date. The logical part of her brain understood. The part that had just watched him smile so easily, that had felt the sting of exclusion, didn't care. She spent the rest of the afternoon in a fog. The image played on a loop. His easy smile, the touch on his arm, the way his guard had been completely down. He was capable of that. He just wasn't capable of it with her. That night, during a mandatory team dinner, he was seated at the coach's table. Ava, from her spot with the players, caught him looking at her once. His gaze was intense, searching, as if trying to decipher something on her face. She looked away, her jaw tight. After dinner, as the team milled about, he approached her. Not directly. He stopped a few feet away, pretending to examine a bulletin board. "Everything all right, Carter?" His voice was low, meant only for her. "Perfect, coach." "You seemed distracted at dinner." "I'm fine." She turned to leave. "Ava." The name stopped her. He moved a half step closer, his back to the room. "What you saw earlier, Dr. Vance, she's a consultant. It was a meeting." She turned to face him, the jealousy giving her a reckless courage. "You don't owe me an explanation." "I know I don't," he said, his eyes holding hers. "But I'm giving you one anyway." "Why?" Because, he said, his voice dropping even further, the look on your face in the lobby. I know that look. It's the same one I get when I see one of the guys on the team getting a little too friendly with you during drills. The confession hung between them, stunning in its honesty. He was jealous, too. The knowledge was a powerful, dangerous thrill. Their eyes locked. The air crackled with all the things they couldn't say, all the lines they'd drawn and were constantly redrawing. In his gaze, she saw the same war she felt, desire versus duty, want versus what was right. A teammate called her name from across the room. The spell broke. He took a sharp step back, becoming Coach Cole again. Stay focused, he said, the command hollow. Playoffs are coming. He walked away, leaving her with a heart hammering against her ribs. The jealousy was still there, but it had transformed. It was no longer a hot, sick feeling. It was a dark, shared secret. They were both in the grip of it, prisoners of a feeling they were powerless to stop and terrified to name. The game was no longer just on the ice. It was in every glance, every avoided touch, every silent acknowledgement of a mutual, impossible want. And the stakes had just gotten impossibly higher. Chapter 12, Crossing the Line. It happened after the final regular season game, a hard-fought overtime win that clinched the top seed for the playoffs. The locker room was pure, unadulterated chaos. Music blared, water bottles flew, the smell of sweat and triumph was thick in the air. Ava had been a wall, stopping 42 shots, including a breakaway glove save in OT that was already being called legendary. She sat in her stall, letting the noise wash over her, feeling the adrenaline drain away to leave a deep, humming exhaustion. And beneath it, a sharper, more persistent ache. For him, for the look he'd given her from the bench after that OT save, a look of such fierce, proud intensity it had felt like a physical touch across the ice. He'd vanished before the celebration began. Of course. She showered, changed, and slipped out while her teammates were planning their invasion of the local pizza place. The campus was quiet, the night cold and clear. She didn't think. Her feet carried her past the dorms, down the path that led to the faculty townhouses. She knew which one was his. She looked it up once, in a moment of weakness she'd never admitted to. A single light glowed in an upstairs window. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was the line. Not the almost line in a dark rink, but the real, tangible, point of no return line. She stood in the shadow of a large oak, frozen. The front door opened. He stepped out onto the small porch, not wearing a jacket, just a long-sleeved gray t-shirt and jeans. He held a glass of something amber in one hand. He didn't look surprised to see her. He looked like he'd been waiting. You should be with your team, he said, his voice carrying softly across the frosty lawn. I know. He took a slow sip from his glass, watching her. That save. She didn't say anything. It was perfect. Textbook. And it wasn't from any textbook I gave you. That was all you. He paused. I've never seen anything like it. The praise, coming here now, felt more intimate than a touch. She took a step out of the shadows. You left. I had to. Another step. Why? He put the glass down on the porch railing with a soft click. You know why. She was at the foot of the porch steps now. He was 5 feet above her, backlit by the light from the open door. She could see the tension in every line of his body, the war raging behind his eyes. Tell me, she whispered. He descended the steps slowly until they were on the same level, the night air cold between them. Because if I stayed in that room, he said, his voice rough, I would have done something incredibly stupid. Like pull you into the equipment closet and kiss you in front of God and everyone. The words hung in the air, a confession that stripped everything bare. "So do it now," she said. The challenge was quiet, absolute. He let out a shuddering breath. "Ava, no more rules, no more coaches or players. Just tell me you don't want this and I'll walk away." He was silent, his gaze burning into hers. The control he wore like armor was gone, shattered. In its place was raw, unvarnished need. He closed the last of the distance, his hand coming up to cradle her jaw, his thumb stroking her cheek. His touch was electric, searing. "I want it," he breathed, the admission sounding like it was torn from him. "More than I've ever wanted anything, and that's why I can't have it." But he didn't let go. He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. His breath was warm, smelled of whiskey and mint. "This is a terrible idea." "As I know. It could end everything. As I know." He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes, searching for doubt, for an out. He found only the same desperate certainty that mirrored his own. With a low groan of surrender, he closed the final, fatal inch. The kiss wasn't gentle. It was a conflagration. Months of pent-up tension, of stolen glances and forbidden longing, exploded. His mouth was hot and demanding against hers, his arms wrapping around her, pulling her tight against him. She kissed him back with everything she had, her fingers tangling in the short hair at the back of his neck, pulling him closer. It was messy, frantic, perfect. The world narrowed to the feel of his lips, the taste of him, the solid strength of his body against hers. It was the crossing of every line, the shattering of every rule. And in that moment, with his mouth on hers and the cold night at their backs, it felt like the only truth in the universe. When they finally broke apart, both breathing raggedly, the reality came crashing back in. The porch light, the quiet street, the magnitude of what they'd just done. He rested his forehead against hers again, his eyes closed. "God," he whispered, pained. She knew what he meant. It was heaven, and it was a catastrophe. He pulled back fully, his expression already shifting into one of deep, gut-wrenching regret. "This can't happen again." She nodded, her own euphoria curdling into a cold dread. "I know. I mean it, Ava. Once we can, I don't know, Barry, explain away, twice is a pattern, twice is the end." I said I know. Her voice was sharper than she intended. He looked at her, his eyes full of a tortured longing. He reached out, brushed a stray strand of hair from her face, his touch now unbearably tender. "That's saved tonight," he said softly. "Don't let this be the thing that stops you from making more like it." He turned and walked back up the steps, pausing at the door. He didn't look back. He just went inside and closed the door gently behind him, the click of the lock sounding like a verdict. Ava stood on the cold lawn, her lips still tingling, the ghost of his arms around her. She had crossed the line. She had got exactly what she'd wanted. And as she walked back to her empty dorm through the silent night, she understood with perfect, painful clarity, he was right. It could only happen once. The cost of twice was a price neither of them could afford to pay. The line was behind her now. There was no going back, only the terrifying, uncertain future ahead. Chapter 13, Distance. The distance began the very next morning, not the tense, charged distance of denial. This was a cold, deliberate vacuum. Ethan was at the 7 a.m. playoff strategy meeting. He sat at the far end of the table from her, eyes fixed on his tablet. When Coach Porter asked for his input on the opposing team's power play, his analysis was flawless, impersonal, and he never once glanced in her direction. It was as if the space she occupied was simply empty air. On the ice for practice, he coached the other two goalies. He spent 20 minutes with the sophomore, adjusting her stance, and another 15 with the freshman, working on rebound control. Ava might as well have been a ghost. When a drill required her participation, he spoke to her through Porter. Dan, tell Carter to challenge the shooter more on the rush. His voice carried no inflection. It was a master class in professional erasure. The kiss, the desperate closeness on his porch, he had locked it away in a vault and thrown away the key. She was now just player one, the starting goalie, a component in his machine. The worst part was that she understood. He was protecting them, but understanding didn't stop the ache. It was a physical pain, a hollow sensation behind her ribs that grew with every ignored glance, every instruction delivered via a third party. The memory of his mouth on hers felt like a dream from someone else's life. Her play suffered. Not dramatically, but in tiny, telling ways. A puck she'd usually glove easily snuck past her shoulder. Her rebounds were less controlled. She was in her head, hearing his corrections in the silence he now gave her. After a particularly sloppy drill where she'd let in 3 soft goals in a row, Coach Porter blew his whistle. "Carter, my office, now." She followed him off the ice, avoiding the looks from her teammates. Porter's office was a cluttered cave of whiteboards and old trophies. He didn't sit. "What's going on with you?" "Nothing, coach, just an off day." "Bullshit." He leaned on his desk. "You've been off for 2 days. Your focus is in the goddamn parking lot. This is playoffs. There are no off days." He studied her. "Is it Cole?" Her blood ran cold. "What about him?" "He's riding you harder than anyone. I see it. The extra sessions, the laser focus." "It's a lot of pressure. Is it getting to you?" The irony was so bitter she almost laughed. "He's not riding me at all. That's the problem." "No, coach, it's not him, it's me. I'll fix it." "You'd better, your backup is looking sharp." It was a blunt warning. Dismissed. She walked out, the threat landing squarely on top of the loneliness. She rounded the corner toward the locker room and nearly collided with him. Ethan stopped short, his hands coming up instinctively as if to steady her, then snatching back to his sides. For a fraction of a second, his mask slipped. She saw it, the flash of concern, the muscle jumping in his jaw, the same war she felt reflected in his eyes. It was there and gone so fast she might have imagined it. "Porter get on you?" he asked, his voice low, his eyes scanning the empty hallway behind her. She nodded, unable to speak around the sudden lump in her throat. His gaze swept over her face, and for a heart-stopping moment, she thought he might say something real. Something about the kiss, the distance, the unbearable tension. Instead, he gave a tight, professional nod. "He's right to. Your tracking has been off. Your feet are heavy. You're playing scared." The words were a knife twist. The last thing she was scared of the puck. She was scared of this frozen wasteland between them. "Fix it," he said, the finality in his tone leaving no room for anything else. He stepped around her and continued down the hall, his footsteps echoing with a grim finality. She stood there, the cold from the tile floor seeping up through her skates. The distance wasn't just a strategy. It was a fortress, and he was on the other side of the walls, determined to keep her out, no matter what it cost them both. The worst part was knowing he was right to build it, and knowing that made the distance hurt even more. Chapter 14. Rumors. The whispers started like a slow drip, then became a steady trickle. It began with the team. Teammates weren't stupid. They saw the electric, unspoken tension that had existed for months, followed by the sudden, deep freeze. They saw Coach Cole's eyes skate over Ava like she was a pane of glass. They saw the way she flinched, just slightly, whenever he spoke in meetings, even when his words had nothing to do with her. The first comment came in the locker room after a hard practice. Ava was taping her stick, her head down. "You and Coach Cole have a falling out or something." It was Maya, a sharp-eyed forward. Her tone was casual, but her gaze wasn't. Ava kept her eyes on the tape. "Why would you say that?" "Dunno, he just doesn't look at you anymore." "And you get real quiet when he's around. Used to be you'd have these whole silent conversations. Now it's just nothing." "He's the coach, I'm a player. There's nothing to have a falling out about," Ava said, her voice flat. Maya just shrugged, but the look she exchanged with Jess said everything. The rumors found more fertile ground off the ice. In the cafeteria, Ava overheard two players from the men's team as she walked by with her tray. "Weird vibe, man. Cole used to be all over her training. Now he acts like she's got the plague." "Maybe she shot him down. You know how those ex-bros are. Think they're gods." A hot flush of shame and anger crawled up Ava's neck. She kept walking, her knuckles white around the tray. The most dangerous moment came from an outsider. A sports reporter from the campus paper was doing a playoff preview piece. He was interviewing players in the lobby of the athletic complex. Ava gave her standard, boring quotes about teamwork and focus. As she turned to leave, the reporter, a guy named Leo with overly gelled hair, asked, "Off the record, is it true there's some friction between you and Coach Cole? Rumor around the rink is he's been pretty hard on you lately, to the point of being unfair." Her heart stopped. "That's ridiculous," she said, forcing a laugh that sounded brittle even to her. "Coach Cole is tough on everyone. He's preparing us to win. Next question." But the seed was planted. If a campus reporter had heard it, how long before someone with a real platform picked it up? The pressure warped the team's dynamics. A pass that should have been crisp to her in a drill went errant. The defenseman, a kid named Ryan, apologized, but his eyes flickered toward the bench where Ethan stood. It was a tiny moment, but it spoke volumes. They were all navigating the minefield now, unsure of the invisible lines. Ava felt the scrutiny like a physical weight. She started eating alone in her dorm room. She took different routes to the rink. Every laugh in a group felt like it might be at her expense. Every hushed conversation felt like it was about them. She saw the toll it took on him, too. The shadows under his eyes darkened. His already rigid posture became almost brittle. At a pre-playoff press conference, a reporter asked him about managing the pressure on his star goalie. Ethan's reply was clipped, his smile never reaching his eyes. "She manages herself. My job is to prepare the team." That night she lay in the dark, the walls of her dorm feeling like they were closing in. The kiss hadn't just crossed a line, it had kicked over a hornet's nest. The buzzing suspicion was everywhere, and there was no way to swat it away without making more noise. The worst part wasn't the rumors themselves. It was the isolating, silent partnership in denying them. They were allies in a cover-up, bound by a secret that was starting to smell to everyone around them. The distance was no longer just personal. It was a performance for an audience that was growing more attentive by the day. The playoffs were about to begin. They were supposed to be the culmination of everything. Now, they felt like a public stage where their every interaction would be dissected, where the space between a coach and his goalie would be measured by 1,000 watching eyes. The game on the ice was the least of their worries. The real game was the one they were losing in the whispers. Chapter 15, Injury Game. The playoff atmosphere was a different kind of cold, sharp, electric humming with a violence held barely in check. The arena was packed, a wall of noise pressing down on the ice. It was game 2 of the quarterfinals. The first game had been a nervy win. This one was a war. The other team, knowing their season was on the line, played with a desperate, reckless fury. They crashed the net, slashed at gloves, talked trash. The referees lost control early. Midway through the second period, with the score tied 1-1, it happened. A puck was shot wide, caromming hard off the end boards. Ava, tracking the play, shifted quickly to her right to square up for the potential centering pass. As she pushed off, her left skate caught a deep, barely visible rut in the ice, a scar from an earlier collision. Her ankle twisted outward with a sickening, wet pop. A white-hot sheet of pain screamed up her leg. She crumpled into the crease, her mask clattering against the crossbar. The play whistled dead. The noise of the crowd faded to a dull roar in her ears, replaced by the sound of her own ragged gasps. The trainer, Mike, was there first, then Coach Porter. Their faces swam above her, mouths moving, words indistinct. The pain was a nauseating throb centering in her left ankle. Not now, not like this. Through the fog of agony, she saw him. Ethan. He'd vaulted over the boards, something coaches almost never did. He pushed past Porter and knelt beside her, his face pale under the arena lights. All the distance, all the cold professionalism was gone, burned away by a raw, primal fear. Where? His voice was a ragged command, his hands hovering, wanting to touch but afraid to hurt. Ankle, she gritted out, tears of pain and frustration blurring her vision. His jaw clenched. He didn't ask the trainer. He gently, expertly, palpated the area around her skate boot, his touch feather-light. He knew what he was feeling for. "It's not a break," he muttered, more to himself than anyone. "Ligament, maybe a high ankle sprain." He looked up at Porter, his eyes blazing. "She's done. Get the backup in." "Cole," Porter started, but Ethan cut him off. "She can't put weight on it. She's done." The authority in his voice was absolute, born of a terrible, personal experience with injury. This was his domain, and he was invoking its brutal laws. Ava wanted to argue, to be the hero, but another wave of pain stole her breath. She could only nod, hating the weakness. What happened next would be replayed on social media and dissected in forums for weeks. Instead of letting the trainers help her, Ethan slid one arm under her shoulders and the other behind her knees. In one smooth, powerful motion, he lifted her from the ice. A collective gasp went through the arena. Cameras flashed. The crowd's murmur swelled into a wave of sound. He carried her off the ice, not alongside the trainer, not with help. He carried her himself, cradled against his chest, her head tucked involuntarily into the hollow of his shoulder. She could feel the frantic beat of his heart through his suit jacket, smell the familiar scent of his soap and clean sweat. It was the most intimate, most exposed moment of her life. Every rule, every boundary, every careful inch of distance was obliterated in front of 10,000 people and a dozen cameras. He didn't put her down until they were in the tunnel, out of sight. He lowered her gently onto a waiting stretcher, his hands lingering for a second on her shoulders. His face was a mask of anguish and something else, a ferocious, protective possessiveness that stole the air from her lungs. "You'll be okay," he said, his voice thick. It wasn't a coach's assurance. It was a vow. Then the medical team took over, wheeling her away toward the X-ray room. As they rounded the corner, she looked back. He stood frozen in the mouth of the tunnel, watching her go, his hands clenched at his sides, his professional world in ruins around him. The injury was bad, but the carry was a catastrophe. He hadn't just broken protocol. He had set it on fire in the middle of the playoff spotlight. The game, her ankle, the playoffs, it all faded into a blur. The only thing that felt real was the ghost of his arms around her, and the devastating certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. Chapter 16, exposure. The X-rays confirmed a grade 2 high ankle sprain. No fracture, but ligaments stretched to tearing. The team doctor's prognosis was grim, 4-6 weeks minimum. Her season was over. Ava sat in the sterile, quiet examination room, her ankle wrapped in a bulky air cast, the reality a cold, heavy stone in her stomach. But the physical pain was secondary. The real damage was playing out on the screen of the doctor's forgotten smartphone, left charging on the counter. Headlines bloomed in real time. Coach's heroic carry or inappropriate contact. Cole's emotional reaction sparks RUMORS. Video, goalie injury, LEADS to shocking moment between player and coach. The video was already viral. It wasn't just the carry. It was the slow-mo close-ups, the way his face had crumpled when she went down, the desperation in his eyes as he knelt beside her, the tender, almost cradling way he'd lifted her, his cheek pressed against her helmet for a brief second. The intimate, whispered exchange in the tunnel, captured by a long-range lens. It was a narrative made in media heaven, the fallen star goalie, the tortured, handsome ex-star coach. A moment of raw, unprofessional passion. Her phone began to vibrate incessantly, unknown numbers, texts from panicked friends, her mother. She turned it off. The door to the exam room opened. It wasn't the doctor. It was Helen Vance, the athletic director, a severe woman in a sharp suit. Her expression was like etched stone. "Miss Carter, how's the ankle?" I'm done," Ava said, her voice hollow. "I see." Vance didn't sit. She stood with her arms crossed. "We have a situation, a significant one. The university has launched an immediate internal review into the conduct of Coach Cole following the incident on the ice." Ava's heart hammered. He was helping me, I was hurt. "There are protocols for injured players, Miss Carter. Protocols every coach is trained to follow. Protocols that exist for very good reasons, pertaining to liability, medical authority, and," she paused, "professional boundaries." The words hung in the air, professional boundaries. They both knew that's what this was really about. "There's nothing inappropriate about what he did," Ava said, the lie tasting like ash. "He was concerned for a player." Vance's gaze was penetrating. "The review will involve interviews with coaching staff, trainers, players." Her eyes held Ava's. "It will be thorough. It will seek to understand the nature of the relationship between student-athletes and staff, to ensure the environment is appropriate." It was a threat cloaked in bureaucratic language. They were going to dig, and they would find the cracks. The 5 a.m. sessions, the private meetings, the rumors the team had already been whispering about, the kiss she could never admit to. "I have nothing to say," Ava whispered. "You will," Vance said, not unkindly. "When the investigator asks, you will have to say something. I suggest you think very carefully about what that is." She turned to leave. "Get some rest. A university counselor will be made available to you." The door clicked shut. Ava was alone with the vibration of the silent phone and the roaring in her ears. The exposure was complete. Their private turmoil was now a public spectacle, a case study for the athletic department. The line they'd crossed wasn't just blurred. It was being examined under a microscope by people whose job was to enforce it. He had tried to protect her from the fall. In doing so, he had ensured they would both crash harder than she ever could have on the ice. Chapter 17, The Sacrifice. The next 48 hours were a suspended nightmare. Ava was sequestered in her dorm, her ankle propped up, her phone a silent brick. The world outside was a chaos of headlines, speculation, and hot takes she refused to read. Her teammates were told not to contact her, during the ongoing review. She knew he was in the eye of the storm. She pictured him in some sterile administration building, facing Helen Vance and a panel of stone-faced lawyers, defending his actions, lying, protecting her. On the third morning, a courier delivered a thick, official-looking envelope to her dorm. It bore the university's seal. Her hands shook as she tore it open. It wasn't from the review board. It was a copy of a press release, scheduled for distribution that afternoon. At the top, in bold letters, statement from ETHAN Cole. Her eyes scanned the formal, lawyer-vetted language. After careful consideration, I am resigning my position as assistant coach, effective immediately. My actions during the recent playoff game, while motivated solely by concern for a student-athlete's well-being, were a clear violation of university protocol and coaching standards. I deeply regret any distraction my conduct has caused the team, the athletic department, and the university community. I wish the women's hockey program the very best in the future. It was a masterpiece of dignified self-immolation. He took full, blunt responsibility. He called it a violation. He offered no defense, no context. He made it sound like a single, impulsive mistake of overzealous care, not the culmination of months of tortured, forbidden tension. He was painting it as a professional error, not a personal one, to protect her. At the very bottom of the page, in a different font, clearly a last-minute, handwritten addition scanned in, was a single line, not part of the official statement. Ava, the net is yours, make it small. E. Her vision blurred. He was gone. He had walked away from the only piece of the game he had left, the one thing that had given his shattered career new purpose. He had sacrificed his own tenuous place in the hockey world to contain the fallout around her. To give the story a clean, simple end, rogue coach resigns. Player moves on. He was erasing himself from her life to save it. The official press release hit the news an hour later. The narrative shifted instantly. The scandal now had a neat, tragic conclusion. The coach was the fallen villain, the goalie the innocent victim of his poor judgment. The investigation into her would quietly dissolve. Her path was cleared. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt a loss so profound it dwarfed the pain in her ankle. She had lost her coach, her confidant, the only person who truly saw her. And he had chosen to become the sacrifice, the price paid for her future. He was giving her back her dream, clean and intact, and taking every trace of himself with him. Chapter 18, Championship Without Him. The world moved on. The headlines faded. A new, older, more unimpeachably professional goalie coach was hired. The team, after the initial shock, rallied around Ava with a fierce, protective energy. They were underdogs now, their star goalie injured, their coach a scandal-tainted memory. It forged them into iron. Ava's rehabilitation was brutal. Every painful step in the pool, every agonizing stretch was fueled by a quiet, burning fury. Not at him, at the circumstance, at the loss. She used the memory of his voice, "The net is yours, make it small," as her mantra. She didn't just want to get back, she wanted to come back as the fortress he'd tried to build. Miraculously, she made it back for the national championship game. 6 weeks to the day after the injury. The doctor cleared her with stern warnings. The ankle was taped, braced, and numb with a legal painkiller. She was not at 100%. She was at something harder, 100% resolve. Walking into the arena for the final was surreal. The noise was the same. The ice was the same. The feeling in her gut was entirely new, a hollow, gnawing absence. He should be here, on the bench with his clipboard, his intense, gray-eyed focus. He'd prepared her for this moment more than anyone, and he was forbidden from witnessing it. She didn't look at the bench. She didn't scan the crowd. She went through her warm-up routine with robotic precision, feeling the ghost of his corrections in every movement. Glove higher, shoulders square. Breathe. The game was a defensive masterclass. Her team, playing for her, blocked shots, took hits, cleared rebounds. Ava was a wall, not the fluid, water-like wall he'd envisioned, but a gritty, determined, pain-ignoring barricade. She tracked pucks through screens, fought through traffic, swallowed up every routine shot. The pain in her ankle was a distant throb, secondary to the acute ache in her chest. With less than a minute left, her team clinging to a 1-0 lead, the inevitable chaos came. A mad scramble in front of the net. Sticks slashing, bodies falling. The puck squirted loose to an opposing forward all alone in the slot, 15 feet out. A million years of time. Ava saw it all unfold in terrible slow motion. The forward's eyes going wide, the cock of his stick. The crowd's roar surging to a crescendo. This was it. The season, the championship, her redemption, all coming down to one shot. And in that frozen sliver of time, she didn't hear the crowd. She didn't feel the pain. She heard a low, calm voice in her head, the voice from 105 AM sessions. You're not here to react. You're here to dictate. Make the net small. She didn't drop. She didn't flinch. She stayed tall, her skates rooted, her body a perfect, patient square to the shooter. She made herself big, calm, and utterly inevitable. She made the net look like a postage stamp. The shooter, faced with this sudden, immovable calm, rushed his shot. He panicked. The puck fluttered off his stick, not as a laser, but as a wobbly, rising knuckler aimed at her glove side. Ava didn't move her feet. She simply snapped her glove hand up, a clean, economical motion. Thwack! The puck hit the leather with a sound so sweet and final it silenced the world. She held it there, a statue in the crease, as the final horn blared. Chaos erupted. Teammates streamed over the boards, piling onto the ice, swarming her. The noise was deafening. Confetti rained down. They had won. Ava was lifted onto her teammates' shoulders, the championship trophy thrust into her hands. She smiled, she cheered, she let the joy of her team wash over her. But as she looked out over the sea of celebrating faces, the shining ice, the blinding lights, the hollow feeling remained. The winning save was the one he'd taught her to make. The championship was the one he'd prepared her to win. And he was nowhere in the picture. She had won it all, exactly as he'd sacrificed himself for her to do, and it tasted like the loneliest victory in the world. Chapter 19, Aftermath. The championship high was a fleeting fever. It broke on the long bus ride home, leaving behind a quiet, hollow exhaustion. The trophy sat up front, gleaming under the bus lights. Teammates slept, earbuds in, or scrolled through their glory on social media. Ava stared out the window at the dark, rushing highway. Her ankle throbbed in time with the wheels. The metal around her neck felt heavy, foreign. She was a national champion. She had made the save. Offers from pro teams, endorsement queries, and interview requests were already flooding the athletic department. She should have been elated. She felt gutted. Back on campus, she became a ghost in a crown. She attended the victory rally, smiled for the photos with the mayor, gave the expected sound bites. She was polite, gracious, and profoundly detached. The world saw a triumphant heroine. Inside, she was standing in an empty rink at 5 a.m., listening to a silence that had once been filled with the sound of his voice, the scrape of his skates. Her physical therapy continued. The new goalie coach, a perfectly nice man named Doug, offered to work with her. She went once. His corrections were technically sound, but they landed on her like noise. She thanked him and didn't go back. She packed up her dorm room slowly. The season was over. Her college career was over. The structure that had contained her life and her feelings for 4 years was dissolving. The future was a wide-open, terrifying blank. In a clean-out drawer, she found it. A single, heavy puck, not a game puck. A practice puck smudged with old tape. He must have left it in the locker room after one of their sessions, and she'd pocketed it without thinking months ago. She held it in her palm, the weight of it familiar and aching. She made a decision. She didn't want the pro offers yet. She didn't want the spotlight. She emailed the head of the sports psychology department, Dr. Lauren Vance, the woman from the lobby. She requested a meeting. Dr. Vance's office was warm, lined with books smelling of citrus tea. She gestured for Ava to sit. Congratulations on the championship. An incredible save. Thank you. You asked to see me. I assume this isn't about post-victory processing. No, Ava took a deep breath. I need to learn how to put something down. A weight. That isn't mine to carry, but I'm carrying it anyway. I need to learn how to play without hearing a voice in my head that isn't allowed to be there anymore. Dr. Vance nodded slowly, her intelligent eyes kind. That's a very mature and difficult thing to articulate, and a very good place to start. She sipped her tea. The voice of a former coach can be a powerful tool. It can also become a ghost. The work is in learning to distinguish between the lesson and the person, to own the skill and release the teacher. Ava felt the first real tear since the night of the injury threatened to fall. She blinked it back. How? By acknowledging the debt, Dr. Vance said softly, and then by forgiving it, both the debt and yourself for feeling it. The meeting lasted an hour. It was the first time Ava had spoken about any of it, the pressure, the isolation, the confusing blend of mentorship and something more without fear. She didn't name names, she didn't have to. Dr. Vance was shrewd and the headlines had told their own story. Walking out, Ava didn't feel fixed, but she felt a faint, tentative sense of direction. The path wasn't about outrunning the past. It was about learning to walk with it without letting it steer. She had the championship. She had the glory. Now she had to build a self that could exist without the empire of hockey, and without the man who had been its most brilliant, ruinous architect. The aftermath was not an end. It was a quiet, painful beginning. Chapter 20, Reunion. 18 months later. The rink in northern Minnesota was a far cry from the collegiate cathedrals of her past. It was small, cold, and smelled of damp wood and hot chocolate. The seats were mostly empty, dotted with families and die-hard locals. Ava Carter, starting goalie for the Minnesota Frost of the fledgling Professional Women's Hockey League, adjusted her mask and tapped her posts. The game was a gritty, fast-paced win. She played well, solid, confident her own. After the final buzzer, she did her media spot, a quick, practiced affair. As she headed down the tunnel toward the locker room, a figure leaning against the cinder block wall caught her eye. He was half in shadow, dressed in a simple dark jacket and jeans. He wasn't looking at her. He was watching the Zamboni make its rounds, his profile sharp and familiar. Her steps faltered, her breath hitched. Ethan. He turned his head as if feeling her gaze. Time didn't stop. It did something else, it folded. The 18 months of silence, of healing, of building a new life compressed into a single heartbeat. He looked older. The lines around his eyes were deeper, but the harsh tension in his jaw was gone, replaced by a quieter, more settled weariness. He looked peaceful. He gave her a small, tentative nod, not a coach's nod, a human one. She walked over, her gear bag heavy on her shoulder. The noise of the departing crowd was a distant murmur. Coach Cole. The old title felt strange on her tongue. Ava. Her name sounded the same. Rough. Real. Good game. That blocker save in the second period was textbook. You were here. Caught the third. A faint, almost shy smile touched his lips. I was in town, consulting for a junior team, saw you were playing. Consulting, so he was still in hockey just from the shadows. The exile wasn't total. Silence stretched, but it wasn't the old, charged tension. It was the quiet of two people taking stock. Your ankle, he asked. Strong, better than before, they say. Good. And you, she ventured. He shrugged, a loose, easy motion she'd never seen from him. Getting by, building decks mostly. Some remote video analysis for a few goalie camps. It's quiet. Building decks. The image was so profoundly ordinary, it almost made her laugh. The Wall of Winnipeg, building decks. I heard about the championship, he said, his voice softening. Saw the save, it was perfect. It was your save. No, he shook his head firmly. It was yours, I just gave you the language, you spoke it. He looked at her, really looked, his gaze clear and direct. You look good, strong. So do you, and he did. The ghosts that had haunted his eyes were still there, but they were memories now, not residents. He shifted, glancing toward the exit. I should let you get to the team. Yeah, but she didn't move. Ethan, thank you for what you did, the sacrifice. He flinched just a little, as if the words still carried a sting. Don't thank me for that. It was the only play. He met her eyes again, his own full of a complex, deep emotion. Watching you play tonight, seeing what you've become without me, that's the only thanks I ever needed. It was worth it. The raw honesty of it stole her breath. There was no romance in his words, no hidden longing, just a profound, settled pride and a bone-deep relief. She nodded, her throat tight. There was nothing else to say. The debt was acknowledged. The forgiveness, she realized, had already happened somewhere in the lonely work of moving on. Take care of yourself, Ava. You too, Ethan. He gave her one last, long look. A look that held the entire history of their silent mornings, their shared pain, their catastrophic, beautiful mistake. And then he turned and walked down the tunnel, disappearing into the dimness. Ava stood there for a moment, the sounds of the arena washing over her. She didn't feel the old, hollow ache. She felt a gentle, final settling. The reunion wasn't a rekindling. It was a release. A quiet, mutual agreement that the story was over, and they had both survived to tell their own tales separately. She turned and walked toward the laughter and light of her own locker room, toward her teammates, toward her future. The ghost was finally at peace, and so, for the first time, was she. Chapter 21, The Choice. The Minnesota Frost made the playoffs. The media dubbed them Cinderella in skates. Ava was their cornerstone, her name now synonymous not with scandal, but with steely, clutch goaltending. The past was a footnote in her professional bio, national champion, collegiate goaltender of the year. One evening, after a hard-fought practice, her phone buzzed with an email. The subject line made her stomach flip. Invitation. Annual Legends and Legacy, charity game and gala. The event was a big deal, a mix of retired NHL greats, current stars, and a handful of rising players from the women's game. It was a networking pinnacle. Scrolling down the list of confirmed attendees, one name leaped out. Ethan Cole, special guest, goalie clinic instructor. Her finger hovered over the decline with regrets button. She had a valid excuse, playoffs, fatigue, the need to focus. But the image of him in the Minnesota tunnel, peaceful, his ghosts at rest, came back to her. That hadn't been a haunted man. That had been a free one. She had spent 18 months building a life without him, and she'd succeeded. She was strong. She was her own. Attending wouldn't be a step backward. It would be the final proof that she'd moved forward. She clicked accept. The gala was a swirl of sequins, black ties, and the low, expensive hum of sporting prestige. Ava wore a simple, sleek black dress. She worked the room, shaking hands, smiling, giving interviews about the growth of the women's game. She was professional, polished, untouchable. She saw him across the crowded ballroom. He was speaking with a group of former NHL players, looking more at ease in a tuxedo than she'd ever seen him in a tracksuit. He laughed at something, a real, unguarded laugh that changed his whole face. Her breath caught, not with old longing, but with a sharp, sweet gladness. He'd found his way, too. Their eyes met. He excused himself from the group and began moving toward her, navigating the crowd with a quiet purpose. He stopped before her, a respectful, careful distance between them. "Ava, you look incredible." "So do you. The tux suits you." A faint smile. Rented. He glanced around the glittering room. Quite a scene. Quite a distance from a 5 a.m. rink. "A lifetime," he agreed, his gaze returning to hers, serious now. "I saw your game last week. Against Boston. You stole that one." "I had a good teacher." He shook his head slowly. "You were a good student. Now you're the master. It's different." He took a small step closer, the noise of the gala fading to a buzz around them. "I need to say something. I've practiced it. I owe you this." She waited, her heart steady in her chest. "What happened between us? The lines we crossed? I will regret the pain it caused you until the day I die. But I will never regret knowing you. You were the brightest, most stubborn, most brilliant thing to happen in the darkest period of my life. You forced me to feel when I was determined to be numb. And you showed me that a person can walk away from a wreck and still build something beautiful." He swallowed, his eyes gleaming with a sincerity that held no agenda, no hope, just truth. "You have every right to hate me, but I hope someday you can just be indifferent." Ava looked at him, this man who had been her ruin and her redemption, her greatest weakness and her source of unparalleled strength. The ghost was gone. In his place was just a man, flawed and brave, who had loved her in the only broken way he knew how, and then loved her enough to let her go. She felt no hatred, no burning desire, just a deep, resonant gratitude for the lessons and a profound peace with the loss. "I don't hate you, Ethan," she said, her voice clear and calm. "And I'm not indifferent, but I've made my choice. I chose the game, I chose myself, and it was the right choice." Relief washed over his features, so profound it was almost painful to see. It was the absolution he'd never allowed himself to seek. "It was," he whispered, "the only right choice." He offered his hand not to hold but to shake, a gesture of equals, of closure. She took it. His grip was firm, warm, and final. "Goodbye, Ethan." "Goodbye, Ava. Go be legendary." He released her hand, gave her one last, proud, lingering look, and then turned and melted back into the crowd, becoming part of her past once more. Ava stood still for a moment, the ghost of his touch on her hand. Then she turned toward the future, toward her teammates waiting at a table, toward the playoffs ahead, toward the long, brilliant career that was hers alone to shape. The choice had been made long ago in the fire. Tonight she simply acknowledged it. She was free.